Welcome to Signal Shift with me, Raakhee, Sue, and our guest today, Todd Montgomery. Todd, a very warm welcome. Thank you for being here.
No, pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Todd is a Robin and Kurt Bainey Endowed Professor at Oregon State University, OSU, in Bend, where he teaches hospitality management. He has worked with several Fortune 500 companies, including Hyatt, Starwood, Disney, Avis, in the past, and he is the founder and director of the OSU Sustainable Tourism Lab, which focuses on economic, community, and environmental issues. His research has been featured in over 50 media outlets, including US Today, NBC News, and a PBS documentary series called Tech Track. The Sustainable Tourism Lab was developed to protect tourism destinations for future generations of residents and visitors. They do this by ensuring that in-depth research meets effective solution development. And one of the key activities of the lab is to study resident sentiment. Now, as listeners well know, we have been focused on the future of travel and tourism this past month. And we've explored this from many different ends of the spectrum, from innovation in travel to noctourism to indigenous tourism. And the idea of sustainable tourism is a part of all these conversations. We've spoken about this across so many episodes, from local protests against overtourism, Venice increasing tariffs for cruises once again, to a town near Mount Fuji actually building a wall to block the view and deter tourists. The term sustainable is thrown around with little understanding often, and sometimes little weight, as a form of greenwashing even. So today, with your help, Todd, and your insights, we really want to discover what sustainable tourism actually means and what it's going to take for each of us as ordinary citizens to really travel responsibly and sustainably in the years ahead. So that's what we'll be covering today. So thank you again, Todd. Really great to have you. What does sustainable tourism mean? Like, what is it? What is it not?
Well, I think your intro covered it really well. And I think in just in the simplest terms, it's a destination in balance. And from our standpoint, it's a destination that will be available for residents and visitors to experience at the same or hopefully better levels in the future. But I liked your comment about greenwashing. I mean, I look at a lot of destinations, work with a lot of destinations, and I think it would be very fair to say that if you look at it from an economics input and economic output, and then you factor in the externalities, the cost of tourism, it could be easily said that there is no destination that is sustainable, particularly if you factor in the travel costs to get to that destination. It's an idea that has yet to really happen. And I'll just say that I spend a lot of my time on two spectrums. I look for destinations that are on the decline, just been on an unsustainable path for too long. And then I also look for destinations that are truly sustainable, and I have yet to find one. So that's where that greenwashing and that conversation is important, because it's an idea, but it's an idea that has yet to materialize.
I guess I'm wondering, which are the places that maybe come close? Are we getting close in some ways? Is there hope in some spots?
Yeah, I spent a lot of my years in Micronesia. My wife is Micronesian; she's from the Marshall Islands, and one of the islands that I really like, that I think has tried, is Palau. Palau is a famous dive destination. It experienced over-tourism and through wholesalers, through large volumes, and it went in that direction. And before kind of sustainability and sustainable tourism really became a kind of a phrase that people understood and talked about, they just cut it off. They said, this isn't working. This wholesale model, this volume model, is destroying a very fragile environmental ecosystem that and is the primary reason that people come. And they had the foresight, and I really give their president, it's a republic, it's a small republic, but I give their president a lot of credit for saying, for taking that initiative and knowing that there was going to be blowback, a lot of blowback. But it's also, they had an advantage. They had an advantage in that they're what I refer to as a gated destination, meaning you had to go through a gate to get there. In that case, immigration. They were an island. There's only one way in. Drivable destinations is a much harder process. But Palau's done a fantastic job, and there's several locations in Alaska that are, trying to replicate some models, but their gates are a little bit harder to control.
You mentioned that life cycle and the decline. Could you take us through that as well, and what that is?
Yeah, so this is the topic of a paper that's coming out from me around Thanksgiving time. The destination or the life cycle is any product or service, right? There's some kind of exploration, some kind of growth, and then eventual decline. When I was in Asia Pacific in the late 1990s and 2000s, what we would do is we would just look for the next best destination, right? We would see who's got the next sleepy fishing village, who's got the next pristine beach that could potentially be developed. And at the time, I thought I was doing a lot of good, because typically these destinations did not have economic viability. And so we were proposing and not giving, at the time, I thought we were giving them an opportunity for an economic livelihood for different citizens. But through the years, what I realized is that was fairly short term, and only a few, primarily the landowners of those particular places, were the ones that truly got the value of those destinations. Before the internet and all of this social media, that life cycle was very long. Like, you would maybe be a magazine article that would say, hey, look at this great destination, and just a few people would read it, and it would take very long for that destination to develop and mature. With social media, that can happen almost overnight now, and so this idea of that life cycle being compressed is really a big issue. And if you just kind of go back to our lab's goal, we want to preserve that for future generations. What we're essentially saying is we want to extend that life cycle out to where eventually, kind of bringing back from an economic standpoint, it reaches a carrying capacity, a sustainable carrying capacity. So it levels out. But in the world that we live, where growth is often the metric of success, a lot of people don't want to think of stagnation or an optimal amount.
It's fascinating, Todd. Maybe we'll see more of this in the paper you're going to release, but I'm wondering, when you say life cycle, has there traditionally been planning of some sort, saying the life cycle lasts X number of years till you reach decline? You mentioned carrying capacity. I'm just curious what you're saying in the context of life cycle and the intention to expand that.
Yeah, so big picture, I mean, this is the kind of funny thing about tourism, as opposed to other industries, is it tends to happen organically. People just start visiting, right? And unless it's a planned community like Disneyland or Disney World or something like that. And so often destinations are in a very reactive stage to what's happening and what they want to be. And also really in the last, when I was, 2000s and stuff, nobody mentioned anything about sustainable tourism. Nobody in the office mentioned or thought about the community, the social impacts at that time, or the environmental impacts. Really, there was no recognition of the costs or externalities of tourism. And so it was just a very different mindset around how we viewed things. And now communities are slowly, and this is like in the last 5 years, you start to see the communities rising. And you mentioned a few, Venice and other places, Barcelona, a lot of Spain is really, is a lot happening, but Hawaii's been dealing with this for 20 years. That's a really big moment in our models when the community demands action. And luckily in a democracy, majority rules, right? So they do have a way to force this balance. But here's the problem. Every day that destination is not in balance, the reason that people were attracted to that destination is slowly being degraded. And so there should be a sense of urgency, because once you get in that decline stage, that dying stage of a destination, there's no real successful case of bringing it back. In Hawaii, there are more native Hawaiians that live out of Hawaii than in it. And the reason why? They've been priced out. So what are the implications? Loss of culture, loss of language, loss of identity, loss of home. And then, so that's one extreme. And then let's look at the other extreme where I'll borrow it from my wife, the Marshall Islands, which is not really a tourist destination yet. They're talking about it. More Marshallese live out of the Marshall Islands than in it. Why? Because they don't have any economic viability. And tourism could potentially bring that. What's the implications? Exactly the same as Hawaii. Loss of community, loss of culture, loss of language. So those are two extreme cases, but man, what an opportunity. That shows that tourism has a place and could fit in the middle and preserve those things that are important to the community. But there's just not a lot of people, thinking like that. Or really that paradigm shift.
I think your point of understanding that there is some place for tourism to work and for a way to make it economically viable. It's just figuring out what that is without a cost to these communities. We spoke about indigenous tourism like 2 weeks back, right, Sue? Yeah. And it was really interesting to discover some of what's happening in that world, why people are attracted to it, how it's growing, but how it needs to grow the right way, and to be very careful with that as well, and how we partake in indigenous tourism. And so, yeah, I'm just, you're seeing all these themes coming together. But yeah, and I think this might lead into the work that the lab is doing. And if you could share that, but I guess the question is, who is addressing this? Who's looking at this? Who's dealing with these problems and coming up with those solutions for tourism? Is it governments? Is it cities? Are they actively working on this as one would wish? And I'd love to lead into the lab and the work you're doing with the lab.
So who is the long-term steward? Well, it should be an indigenous member. They're the only ones with a unique tie to the land that have the long-term connection and should be thinking long-term post-decline of tourism, what we want this community to be. So I have yet to see it, but Hawaii is getting pretty close. If you look at its board makeup, both on the management side and on the promotional side, Native Hawaiians are playing a very prominent role, and that's exactly what it should be. But that's who it should be. Now, who's actually doing what now? Well, I think the protests kind of tell you. The government's not doing the job. Some destinations are not doing their jobs. And the citizens are coming forward saying, hey, this isn't working for me. This isn't working for my community. This is working for my family. As a result of that, once again, kind of using that carrying capacity, government, democracy framework, politicians take note. And what we are starting to see through the legislation process, that then goes to the politicians. Politicians write bills. Those bills then put either a constraint or an unconstraint on tourism. Maybe they're increasing taxes. Maybe they're putting some economic incentives in place for further development, whatever that may be. So that's how it's working. DMOs, destination management, marketing organizations, are starting to recognize that they need to take a lead on this. It's just a big fragmented process, and depending on where you are in the world or what country you're in or what community you're in, there's no playbook, and there's no really strong group out there saying this is what we should be doing. And the reason, and not to be a cynic, but a lot of people profit off of the status quo. So what we do, we work with a lot of communities, and we do a lot of polling and community engagement to understand where residents are, where their costs of tourism are, where the benefits are, what actions can be taken, and really just trying to help them put data to the problem. So we go out, we engage, survey residents using U.S. Census data on the demographics. One of the things we've learned in the process is bringing those that typically are not at the table, getting their voices heard, both minorities, indigenous members, economically, the workforce. And then we go back and we benchmark where residents are, and then we work with them to try to find that balance and to try to, at this stage, there's so much to be done. We're just looking for that low-hanging fruit. And then the last part is we play an advocate. We speak at legislation when bills are coming up. Sometimes we're asked to be an expert contributor. We've had a lot of success. There's a big need out there, and the niche that seems to be where we fall into is this idea of objective data.
A couple episodes ago, we were talking about a recent report that came out around the increasing number of travelers, not only from the United States, but that are set sort of the second tier of countries as their, as their economy grows. And I was curious, in your work, are you already seeing people think about this kind of next wave of tourists and travelers coming, what to do about that? I mean, it just seems like it's going to add a whole other layer of complexity as you're navigating who's visiting from where and what time of year. And we were even posing the question, there might not be an off season anymore just because there's so many travelers.
Yeah. So, we're in unprecedented economic growth, right? I mean, we've seen it, really for the last 10 years, a steady increase, and that, more spendable, disposable income. And so we're going to continue to see growth, steady growth. We're going to see destinations use the price lever, essentially increasing prices to limit tourism. I was actually talking to one of my research assistant's husbands, and he was telling me that the fees of hotels, the hidden fees of hotels, he started changing some of the decisions that he's making of where he's going based on that. And I think for the certain market, there's going to be this increased fee through the occupancy tax, the tourism tax, through gated communities, the entry fee, these kinds of things. This is where that constraint is going to start monitoring and tampering down demand. And it's only going to increase. And I know this, or I feel pretty confident in this, because of the bills that we monitor. The number of bills that are increasing fees, increasing hotel tax, that's primarily the way that they collect tourism taxes really across the world, and is going to have that impact. I think what's going to happen is, a lot of people are going to get priced out. But, there's something to be said, I'm for visiting a place and how that can affect you and can change you. And, I'm a Midwest guy, grew up in Oklahoma, never thought in my life that I would go overseas, didn't have a passport. And then just that one interview at the end of undergrad, hey, we got this island in Saipan, you want to go? I'm like, single, 22, know nothing, like, yeah, I'll go. And I always think about that experience because I had never snorkeled before and never really at that time was environmentally conscious. But I remember that first dive at Saipan. Saipan is a really good dive destination, and the coral and the fish, and I was blown away. And I, as clear as day today, I can think, man, it's beautiful under here. This has got to be protected. This is awesome. And that was the switch for me in terms of how I viewed things. And so kind of taking that back to the macro, if people get priced out, that's a problem, because these experiences can truly change perspectives, can educate. And so how we find that balance is going to be a challenge. And that's really the concern for me as the constraints start to come in around over-tourism and taxation.
There's so many really conundrums in trying to deal with this. And so you can see the complexity of trying to really address the issue of having sustainable tourism. So it's not an easy job.
But there's definitely a lot of benefits there in getting this right. For communities, I go back to livelihood, and I go back to the Hawaii and the Marshall Islands example. I mean, there's some important stuff, and there's some real life impacts to people if we don't get this right. My wife's home island, the Marshall Islands, really fun project, because this is the earliest stage of the life cycle, and so they can learn from all the mistakes. And kind of the work that we try to do is working out case studies, and not in an academic sense, but a case study that maybe you don't speak English and is your first language, but the video or the message of somebody from another part of the world speaking another language, realizing that here's what they learned and here's where they wish they were, and having these locals see that example, saying, I'm not going down that road. We're going to get ahead of this. We're going to fix this problem. And it's an academic paper doesn't do that. The stories, the storytelling, the people communicating and connecting those stories that otherwise would never have been connected for a million reasons would they never be connected. But that early life cycle stage is really interesting to me because, like I said, if you put the zoning in, you put the policies in, you put the planning in early, you have such a huge advantage of going in that, being put on more of a sustainable path.
Todd, leading then into that final question, which is the big one. For myself, for Sue, and for everybody listening, what can we do? What should we be doing? Of course, we all want to explore. We still want to see the world, but I think people certainly now are taking it more seriously, that we have to do it responsibly. So what should we be thinking about? How should we behave differently in this very short-term kind of near future,
Yeah, I think it's, this isn't a great answer, but it's that education piece and just knowing the impact that you're making. If you're going to take a trip to Hawaii, know that the hotel you're staying in was probably booked 80% full over the last year. And they probably did very similar things that you're doing now. And you need to do it better. And I'm not saying, you're not generating any trash or anything around that. But just know that you're making an impact, that your stay has an impact on the environment, but really kind of going back to that community piece. It has an impact on the community piece. And having some empathy. When I walk into a hotel, I often look at who are the managers, who are the frontline workers. I can't see the owners, but a lot of times I will try to look up the owners. Depending on where I'm staying, and knowing that there's usually a discrepancy there. There's a good chance that it's Hawaiians that are cleaning your rooms, and there's a good chance that it's not Hawaiians managing the hotel, and there's even a better chance that that is not a Hawaiian-owned hotel. That is a foreign investment, and those profits, some of it recirculate through the economy, but a lot of those profits are extracted from that. So if I could give one thing, and this is the thing I always look at when I book a hotel, is try to find out who the owner is and try to stay and shop from a local owner. I'm talking about a native local owner. If you can do that, then you're changing the costs and benefits equation. You capture more. The impact, the positive benefits of tourism are so much more, but they don't make that easy. It's not just a simple Google or chat to find out who that is. But that's important. If you want to make an impact, that's the easiest way to make the largest impact, that empathy and where you spend your dollars within that community. And if you can do that, you're doing it better than 99% of everybody else.
Fantastic. And I think that's a challenge we can definitely try and take on.
Right. Yeah, I think there should be a website. I mean, it just should be easier.
Yeah.
It should be easier to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Todd. Really appreciate all your insights and your shares today. To everybody listening, I hope you've learned a lot. We certainly have. This has really been eye-opening. Definitely go and see some of Todd's work. So, Todd, thank you for being here. Thank you to everybody for listening and watching. Until next time, see you again.